Hi, everybody. We're going to be starting exactly at 6 o'clock. Cam is here and Dame is here. They're waiting patiently. But before we get started, I'll just do a little bit of housekeeping about Lit Fridays. So keep your eyes peeled for July 24th. We'll be doing a studio visit with Dominique Chambers, who has an exhibition opening up at the August Wilson Center in September. So me, Kilolo Luckett, who's the curator of that exhibition, and Dominic will be talking about his artwork, the current moment, political, cultural, pandemical, and otherwise. And just after that, in August, we actually are very lucky to have Fahamu Piku, who's a visual artist, and Nelson George, who is a writer, producer, director as well, who will be with us. So keep your eyes open. I'm gonna say hi to Damon. Hey, Damon.
Hey.
How you doing?
I'm good. I see you. It's funny, when you said you had Fahamu coming, that's my homie. And so I'm thinking, oh, Fahamu's gonna be in town, we need to link up. But then I forgot that, he's not gonna be in town. He's gonna be on Zoom.
That's one of the lesser beauties of the Zoom phenomena. You might see people doing stuff in town, but then you have to remind yourself, oh, that's not a thing at all.
It's just a screen, just a computer screen.
Fahamu is great. I've been looking at his artwork since I was doing my bachelor's degree in Atlanta.
Okay.
Cam, how are you feeling?
I'm good. How are you?
And these things always are a little make me a little nervous, but it's fine. It's all love. It's Pittsburgh.
Yes, it is.
All love. So, hello, Augustonians again. You've already seen Cam and Dame. I'm going to read their bios, and then we're going to go into them. They're going to share pieces of literature. Dame, you're going to be reading your own work, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. And then Cameron says he has a quote to share with us. So, Damon Young is a writer, critic, humorist, satirist, and professional Black person. He's a co-founder and editor-in-chief of Very Smart Brothers, coined the Blackest thing that has ever happened to the internet by the Washington Post, and a columnist for GQ. Damon's writing, which vacillates from anthropological satire and absurdist racial insights to razor-sharp cultural critique and unflinching indictments of privilege and bias, has often generated praise from his peers. Ava DuVernay called his voice clear and critical. Michael Eric Dyson says he's one of the most important young voices in humor writing today. And Casey Lemon called his work the best of American 21st century writing. Damon's debut memoir, What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Blacker, a memoir and essays from Echo HarperCollins, is a tragicomic exploration of the angst, anxieties, and absurdities of existing while Black in America, and won Barnes & Noble's 2019 Discover Award. It was also longlisted for the PEN America Diamondstein Spielvogel Award, nominated for an NAACP Image Award, and is a Krauss Essay Prize nominee. NPR, which named it one of the best books of 2019, called it an outstanding collection of nonfiction. Damon currently resides in Pittsburgh's North Side with his wife, 2 children, and his faithful bottles of Nexium Lisinopril. Cameron Heyward was selected by the Pittsburgh Steelers in the first round of the 2011 NFL Draft out of Ohio State. One of the league's top defensive tackles, Hayward is a 5-time Steelers team captain and has earned 2 AP All-Pro nods as well as 3 trips to the Pro Bowl. During his 9-year NFL career, Hayward has established himself as a leader, not just on the field, but in the Pittsburgh community. He has twice been selected as the Steelers' Walter Payton Man of the Year and was the 2019 honoree of the Dapper Dan Sportsman of the Year Award for his charitable work in Western Pennsylvania. In 2015, Hayward established his own foundation, the Heyward House, which supports a number of causes near and dear to his heart, including, but not limited to, the Boys and Girls Club, the Ronald McDonald House, the Southeastern Brain Tumor Foundation, Kids Voice, Urban Impact and Northside Youth, and Craig's Closet, a program named after Hayward's father, Craig Ironhead Hayward, and that organization provides dress and interview clothing to young boys. Hayward also participates in numerous Steelers charitable events and endeavors, supporting the Pittsburgh Food Bank, the United Way, and the UPMC Children's Hospital, among other Western Pennsylvania charities. So we're gonna welcome Cam and Dame, who do excellent work in Pittsburgh and provide excellent work via their sportsmanship as well as their writing to communities beyond Pittsburgh. Which one of you guys feels like sharing what you want to read first?
I'll let Damon go. He's the writer. He's the pro already.
All right. You might regret this because what I'm going to read. Okay. All right. So I'm going to read a passage from my book, What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Blacker. This is actually the first, literally the first words in the book, the intro. Okay. So I'm going to read just a few paragraphs from that. And the title of the introduction is Living While Black is an Extreme Sport. Every New Year's Day, hundreds of people gather together on the banks of the Monongahela, a 130-mile-long river that begins in Fairmont, West Virginia, runs along a stretch of factories, steel mills, and power plants through the Mon Valley, and flows to Pittsburgh, where it converges with the Allegheny River at Point State Park to form the Ohio River. Once there, these people strip and dive in. New Year's Day, as you probably know, occurs in January. And the average temperature in Pittsburgh then hovers somewhere between hold my beer and fuck this shit. Which means that they're usually splashing butt-ass naked in Appalachian slush puppy. They call themselves the Polar Bear Club in their annual dive, the Polar Bear Plunge. Perhaps, while reading that paragraph, an image of a polar bear plunger plopped into your head. Without knowing anything about you, I am certain that the bare-chested, shivering, and possibly inebriated person you envision happened to be white. And not just because whiteness is such the American default that has even colonized our imaginations, but because willingly exposing yourself to frostbite, hypothermia, and a trillion-year half-life Mon Valley isotopes floating downstream is about as that's some white people shit as that's some white people shit gets. Only someone so comfortably ensconced in privilege that they need to find ways to fabricate closest to death to feel alive will leave their bed and blanket and house and clothes and city and the tens of thousands of years of civilization devoted to finding more efficient ways to protect us from the elements in the dead of winter to belly flop in a billion gallons of toxic ice. It's so white that if you happen to be a non-white member of the Polar Bear Club, and it doesn't matter if you're Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, Shaka Khan, or Shaka Zulu, you become, from the time you remove your clothes to the time you climb back out of the water, white by osmosis. I'm done.
Thank you for sharing, Dame.
No problem.
I've seen those, but I saw it in Wisconsin.
We definitely still have the Polar Bear Club here every year. Like 500 people get down on the banks, jump in, and yeah. It's that.
Have you seen it, Cam?
I've heard about it. I'm not doing that. Yeah, man. I have a large body mass for a reason, and that's one of the reasons to stay away from the cold. So, it's already cold enough in Pittsburgh.
Who's your quote from, Cam?
Well, I actually have two. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay, so I have two. My first one is Theodore Roosevelt. My mom actually got me a big poster for one of my rooms, The Man in the Arena. I'll read that first. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out the strong man's stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who actually is in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there's no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasm, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end of triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly. So that is but excuse me, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. That's my first one. And then my next one, I've always been big into poetry, and it's always like kid poetry to me that always sticks out more, and I draw to. Shel Silverstein is one of my favorite poets, and this is really short. It's called "Listen to the Muslims." Listen to the Muslims, child. Listen to the don'ts. Listen to the shouldn'ts, the impossibles, the won'ts. Listen to the never haves. Then listen close to me. Anything can happen, child. Anything can be.
What made you pick those two quotes?
For the Theodore Roosevelt man in the arena, I've always been a person, I'd rather say I try than not try at all. I've always been the person that doesn't concern himself with how he's looked at, but whether my actions matter. I always want you to know that, I'd rather dare to try. I'd rather know that I've given you everything I have than to think, what could it be? What could have been? And then just to listen to the Muslims, I look at where we are and I look at our children growing up, and I think there's going to be so many times with everything going on that you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that. And I just want to inspire. There's so many children. If one person hears today that, it gave them the urge to do more and try and, think that anything is possible or you can accomplish any goal or any job, that's what I want.
I find that very interesting, especially in the context of Damon's book, What Doesn't Kill You Makes You Blacker. Because I think in an American context, we're all kind of raised, right, with that endeavor, right, to be whatever you want and do whatever you want. But Damon, multiple times in your book, there are times where you're talking about this invisible force that seems to interrupt even the best planned, most well-intentioned. You call it the perfect and the lucky. And you get to a point in your life sometimes in the Black experience or watching the Black experience where it's like you feel like you've delivered perfection, or you feel like you've been lucky somehow. And then that kind of abuts with how you're raised to think that you can be anything and you can do anything. And then it seems like a way of like meeting the world. So what do you guys, what's your take on the world now? We're stuck between a pandemic. We're stuck between, like racial, like political race matters, right? Like police brutality is an issue in the country. Access to public health is determined by race and access to certain economic benefits. How do you guys see the current moment right now?
I mean, we're in two pandemics right now. Obviously the COVID-19, which is, everywhere in the world. Everyone's been affected by it, but also the pandemic of anti-Blackness and racism, which also exists everywhere. Perhaps not in the same context, in the same form as it does in America, but wherever colonization happened, wherever industrialization happens, wherever those things occur, then you can't necessarily remove the bias, the race, and also all of the things, the classism, misogyny, the transphobia, all of that, is in the same stew. And right now, there's a reckoning happening, or at least there's the beginning of a reckoning. Because right now you're having this national conversation about race. You're having these anti-racist books being at the top of the New York Times bestseller list. Businesses and people and celebrities releasing statements and doing things with solidarity, Black Lives Matter. And that's all great. And those are all great gestures. But we have to be careful not to confuse a gesture with, considering the gesture to be the end and not the means and not a start. Because that's what it is, it's a start. It's like, okay, You did this gesture, you started. It's not an absolute, you're not like absolving yourself of any work that needs to be done. Basically, what you're doing is opening the door for more work. And that's the thing that I think just more people just have to realize is that if there's going to be any sort of systemic and structural change or revolution or whatever, we're talking things that have existed for hundreds of years, for centuries. So it's not going to change with a retweet. It's not going to change with a hashtag. Like there's a lot of work to that. There's a lot of work that has to be done.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think, and it's not just Black people that need their voices to be heard. And I think through this, I think we learn a lot as a child. And I feel like some people aren't benefited from learning the truth or benefit from seeing the real truth. And I agree wholeheartedly with Damon. When it comes to, you see these tweets and the hashtags and the gestures, and that's kind of why I chose the man in the arena, because I didn't want this to be about, something falling on deaf ears and something that literally stops by just, saying something. The actions that need to be taken place have to take place. It's good to have those kumbaya moments and say that everything's fixed in one day, but who are we kidding? There are things that need to be changed. To think that if you live in the North or the South, your education could be totally different, and you don't hear about different things that happen in the world or our history is dumbfounding to me. How can you say you're a historian if you only know one side of the story? And we're going through 2 pandemics right now where we've been dealing with one for 400 years. And to say that, it's going to get fixed by doing one thing or me drawing awareness to it is not right. And, I'm thankful that, there's a conversation, but where's the conversation going to lead us?
I was having that thought as well, as far as thinking about like vulnerability. And it's about what both of you have kind of touched upon in terms of, with the first initial kind of push to organize right after Breonna Taylor and George Floyd's deaths, first the conversation opened up and it was very much about race. And in the history of like American social justice movements, the face of our quote unquote martyrs have always been Black men. But as soon as that became the banner behind which we organized ourselves as the Black community, then the rest of the conversations opened up about violence against Black queer people, violence against, Black trans people, misogynoir, violence against Black women in their own communities. And it made me think about how these things make people be vulnerable, or it makes them clam up. And I just wondered, how do you guys see what the role of vulnerability is, especially as Black men? What's the role of vulnerability in all of this, and kind of coming to terms with all of the unprivilege you might not have seen or have seen, but didn't know how to relate to now in this moment?
Well, it's necessary, because vulnerability, or allowing yourself to be vulnerable, breeds empathy. And an empathy void, and this isn't just an empathy void that affects how you perceive other people. It could be a void with how you perceive yourself, and how, you're talking about trans lives and queer lives, and how patriarchy actually just is in the mix with all of this too. And, it's funny. When men talk about feminism and patriarchy and things that involve people who are not cisgender, straight men, I think that there could be a pivot in this conversation where you recognize that it actually helps you too. that you're not just, oh yeah, we need to evolve, we need to be more progressive to be better people to women, or to be less homophobic, or to be less transphobic. It also helps us. It also allows us that space to evolve. It also doesn't compel us to constrict ourselves into these like little boxes where, okay, so there's this expectation of how a hetero Black man is supposed to be. So I'm going to try to squeeze into this box, even if that isn't me, even if that isn't true to who I am. And in vulnerability, so much, and I write about this in the book, the concept of performance. And so you have the reality of who you are, and then you have the expectation, and you fill the gap with this performance. And when you're performing like that, when you make yourself, so that you're always on stage, that you're not authentic, you can't build that empathy. It's just impossible to do that. And so when you have that lack of empathy, when you don't allow yourself to be vulnerable, then you are not a person who is of any use in a movement like this. Because again, you're just not coming from a place where you're ready. Where you're ready to put your ego somewhere, where you're ready to just, like, you know what, freedom doesn't just mean that Black men are free. Freedom means that all Black people are free.
Yeah.
Yeah, vulnerability in my sport takes, everybody thinks of machismo, the macho guys. But vulnerability, I feel like, is, and I think I've, had to experience that a little bit more. My wife is white, and, I felt like, I had been holding on to so much, and so much that, I wanted to share, but didn't know how to share. And she was coming from a place where she just didn't understand, and she felt embarrassed to me that, I had been married and there were still talks we needed to have. And, through that love, I love her more for that, because I felt like she engaged and wanted to learn with me. We, in our sport, we're taught to be macho men and, walk around with our chest out and not show any emotion, unless we win. But that's not right. I can think back to, Tamir Rice when he was killed. And for me, I looked at my child, and, my son was literally months old, and I broke down in tears. That broke my heart, because, I look back at, George Floyd, and I think of his parents and his family. And I think that's, as a parent now, you understand even more how much it weighs on you. And if you don't have empathy for that, what are we talking about? I think for me, Michael Shea really said it really well. All we're fighting is to be equal, equal. And people have a hard time even grasping that. And I've used this time to be more open and, not hide behind, these things that have been going on for so long. Do I think I'm perfect? No, but I have a voice, and I have a chance to explain myself and talk through it, and have these conversations that hopefully enlighten me or enlighten somebody else.
I also wanted to ask, since you brought it up, how, because your mother is white as well, and your father is African American, and so
My mother's mixed.
I'm sorry?
My mother's mixed.
Your mother's mixed.
Yeah.
So how do these cross-generational conversations come to pass in your family? Your mother has this mixed, your father's African American. They come from a different generation kind of blooming, right? It's like 60s, 70s. Yeah. And then you have your experience now. Is the conversation the same? Is it reflective? Has it evolved? What are the conversations amongst your family like about this moment?
It's kind of funny you bring that up. Recently, and it's still fresh, but my grandfather passed away. And,
I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thank you. But hearing the stories of how he met my grandmother, and how he he and my grandmother would take my mom to, protests. He was part of the Coast Guard. He came back. He became a teacher. He worked on the Board of Education. He was the first Black teacher at Carrick High School. And, looking back on that and seeing the interaction, my grandmother was just telling me last time I saw her, she said, you could have white people protesting, but then Black people get arrested just right behind them. And, we're having conversations right now. My mom's telling me about different things she just grew up with, and it was less likely to see a mixed kid than even a Black kid, because interracial relationships just weren't existent at that time. I remember she felt embarrassed because even on a Scantron, my mom didn't know how to, properly list herself, because they said you were either Black or white. My mom said she was both. But, through the Scantrons, she felt uncomfortable. And the teacher looked at her like she was crazy. Dealing with it now and seeing my children, and they're very light, fair skin. But, when they have a Black father, they're going to have to deal with this. And, I'm going to have these conversations as they get older, because I was taught that way. My mom has always told me, when you have an interaction with a police officer, articulate yourself, put your hands on the wheel, and that you would think that's always a positive, but sometimes, that's just not enough.
And so the next question that comes up, and then we have questions from people who are watching, is another thing I've been realizing is that at this moment, even people who are close to you or even from your same community might have a different idea than you about what justice means or about what justice looks like. I've had instances where I've been like, well, justice is everybody's free. Black trans people, Black LGBTQIA+ people, everybody's free. And I've had people very close to me be like, wait, what do you mean? And I go, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? And I think it's one of those moments where people who are very intimately in your life become revealed in a sense that their ideation of justice is different from yours. And so what do you guys think justice is in this moment? Or how do you think we could all possibly move toward some kind of consensus about what it means to kind of live and let live and make sure that our system doesn't overtake our interpersonal treatment of one another as humans?
I mean, justice is a complex word, really, because even just thinking about criminal justice and the movement to defund or abolish the police. Well, when you think about that, then you think about, okay, so what would a world look like without that, without law enforcement? Like how would that work? And there are people who have written about this, who have studied this, who have done work around this concept, but it's a new concept for me. And so I haven't really been able to wrap my mind around that because I'm just not there yet. I'm just not there where I can envision a world. And again, that's due to my own lack of imagination. That's just due to my own lack of imagination. But, to your point, I also had conversations with people whose concepts of justice, I guess, are different than mine. And I guess the way to respond to that is that if the most oppressed person, so let's say Black trans woman who is Muslim, okay, is free, then that means I'm free too. Like and I think that people probably should start thinking of it that way. Like if the people who are the most oppressed, who are the least privileged, are free, are able to exist and thrive and not have to worry about the same sort of, bias and subjugation, that means that it is trickled down and that we all are definitely free too. So yeah, when people kind of don't have that recognition, it kind of confuses me, because it's almost like they think that justice is almost like, I don't know, like a like double dutch or something, where if you don't jump in, you're just going to miss your turn, and you might get skipped or something if someone else who is less privileged, more put upon, receives it. It's like, no, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way at all.
Yeah, Damon, you kind of hit that. I don't even know how I one up that, or even when we're not competing, but you say it in the most simplest way. You're covering all bases when you think of the least fortunate. I think justice, it's a tricky word, because you're not just looking for a one-stop fix. Where are we going? It's not just going to be police reform. How's there education reform? How are there different ways, where we can betterment ourselves? I think this is something that needs to build, continue to be learned, and it's not just gonna magically go away. How are we having conversations to put the next generation in a better place? Because I don't know if we're necessarily going to fix it right away, and I don't know if it's going to get fixed in a year. We have to be ready for the next generations, where they look at this and say, this was the clear path to start, but this isn't going to be finished anytime soon.
Yeah, that reminds me, it's really quick, of the I think it's the MLK quote, that the bend of the universe, the arc of the universe bends towards justice. But that doesn't mean it's going to happen in our lifetime. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that doesn't. I mean, if you really believe that, that we could be a start, but that doesn't mean that we'll be the ones who actually see it. Which is, it's a sobering thought. It's a sobering thing to acknowledge and recognize. But yeah, I mean, if you do believe, and also if you have the Judeo-Christian belief of an afterlife, then this arc, this bend, may not happen for eons. And I hope it happens before then.
It took about 500 years for us to kind of come to the culminating definition of race, 500 or 600 years to come to the culminating definition of race that we have, and to have the society that we have right now. Mm-hmm. And so where I would also hope, Cam, that it could happen. It would be a miracle. It would be the most beautiful blessing to maintain, right? To have it done in a year. Right. Like that would be like heart so big, exploding, right? But when you think about the time that humanity has put into constructing a system that relies on the subjugation of an entire people, it's at least going to take half that amount of time for us to get to a point where we're just like, what? I think it's Nicole Seeley that has a poem that's in 2 parts. And I'm blanking on the title and I'm so ashamed, but I know, I hate that. It's like the first poem is about looking at a certain Black visual artist's work. And it's shaped like a candelabra, and the candelabra is supposed to be a metaphor for lynchings. So she has one version that's edited, and then she published the version of it that's not edited in her full-length collection. And in the full-length collection, it's different because the viewer of that piece is so far in the future that they have no idea what a lynching is. They're so removed from it, and they're in such a context of not having a reverberation of it. And I guess when I think of a future, I think of the halftime. It's at least going to take half the time of people creating these circumstances for us to kind of get out of them. But we have to remain dedicated to, the fruit we will not see, even if we're going to see some improvement for ourselves in some respects. So there are questions from the audience. There's a question for both. I'll start with that. And it said, how did the public lynching of George Floyd affect you spiritually, physically and mentally, what was your reaction? And I guess that question doesn't only have to be couched to George Floyd. I know I first heard of lynchings when I was 6 or 7. I grew up in the South, and so have been seeing it since I heard of it. So how do these events affect you when they happen? When there's a George Floyd, a Tamir, a Nina Pop, a Ramia. There's more and more and more. Because I think I saw a news headline where it was like there were 6 people lynched in the Gulf Coast South over the last few months during protests, literally lynched. So when you see these events, how do they affect you?
I think for me, I grew up in the South as well. Living in Atlanta, I think back to when I was a kid, and I went to a private school my first 2 years of high school. And to go to the high school, there was this big warehouse, and it always had a monkey stuffed animal hung. And we would drive to school and always see it. And to see that and know that was okay, that image always plays with me, because for someone to even think that was even okay, to think that people wouldn't see that, or it's okay for people to see that, that image stays with me. And when I see young men and young women, literally killed in front of loved ones, it's been rough. I think having those, holding onto your family members even tighter, because you don't know what tomorrow's even about. I like to think I'm in a blessed situation, but my skin becomes before anything else. You don't know my whole story, and you don't know if this is the last time you're going to see somebody you love.
Yeah, man. I'm gonna keep it 100. When I heard about George Floyd, when I saw George Floyd, and even read about Breonna Taylor, and let me rewind. I did not. I think I said I watched George Floyd. I did not. And I still haven't watched that video. I've seen screen grabs, screenshots of it, and I know what happened, but I still haven't watched that. To say that you're desensitized to a thing has this connotation of minimization. Like if you're desensitized, then that means you maybe don't care as much. You're so numb. And I prefer sensory overload, because that's what I think what I'm feeling right now, where I didn't feel any differently about George Floyd than I felt about Trayvon, or then I felt about Sandra Bland, or then I felt about Eric Garner, Mike Brown, Philandro Castile. I mean, you could just continue to name the names. Tamir Rice, Antoine Rose.
Ahmaud.
And yet this didn't, like, when I saw it, I was like, yeah, that's fucked up. The way he died is awful, it's terrible. And I think that what has kind of broken, maybe not broken, but maybe released a sort of levee or whatever inside of me, is COVID. And this happening while we're in the situation that has been exacerbated by weaponized white supremacy. Where COVID would have been here regardless of who was president or who the administration was. That train wasn't going to stop, but the scale that we've been affected by it, the deaths that we're still having, the spikes that we're still having, the way that all of our lives have been impacted, it's because of this criminally unfit man who is in office. And how science and how data has been politicized, like a virus is somehow partisan. And you see people in parts of the country, and even here in Pittsburgh, I follow the people who run Cards Unlimited in Shadyside, And they had an issue yesterday with a person walking into their store refusing to wear a mask. And so just that right there, you know, we talked at the beginning about the corona or about the pandemics. And COVID is a new pandemic. Racism, anti-Blackness is a pandemic we've lived through and we continue to live through for, you know, the last 400 years. And so the exacerbator, the difference to me right now is this new pandemic on top of everything else that we have to contend with, where now it's like, shit, can I go to the store without wearing a mask? I want to like walk my kids. I want to send my kids to school. And so you're beginning to, we've always seen this impact that racism, that bias, that white supremacy has had. And I think right now it's just reached this critical mass point where it's got the country to a point where our day-to-day mundane tasks are completely changed and will be changed forever. Like, remember, you know, when 9/11 happened, and how our lives have been changed since then, how air travel is completely 100% different. I was on a college basketball team, and I remember, you know, 1998, 1999, you didn't have to do a lot to get on the plane. You just, you know, you went through some security, you checked your bags, and then boom. Like, you even if you watch movies from the 90s, you see people running through airports, like these romantic scenes, trying to stop someone from getting on the plane. There's no way in hell that's happening. 50 people you try to run for in 2020, okay? And so and that's just an example of how 9/11 just completely changed our lives. Department of Homeland Security didn't exist before then. You know, a Patriot Act, it's all this other stuff. And so how are our lives going to change? Like, what's 2022 going to look like? Once, you know, God willing, once this is over, or once we have a vaccine or whatever, how are our lives going to be different? Because they are going to be. And I think that what's happening, you know, you see so many people involved in this movement now, which is, I'm a Q hunter. I haven't seen this much attention to a race-related movement in my lifetime. I just haven't. Ferguson didn't have this. The LA riots back in, you know, the 80s or the 90s didn't have this. You know, I didn't live in the 60s, so I don't know. I don't know the civil rights movement of then felt how this feels now. But I do think that this now is because of this new pandemic on top of the old one.
And I also think that there's this way in which people get and don't get how it is how our social system is constructed around race that makes more people vulnerable to contracting COVID than others. When I get on the bus and I'm going to and from and I have my mask on, it's me and, you know, my elder African American community members that are on the bus. When you see those snapshots of like the train in New York in certain neighborhoods, where usually by the time you get to that neighborhood, all of the folks of color and Black people are off the train at that time because you've reached a certain space, all of the riders are still Black, first generation, and POC folks who are still there. And it's a lack of access to capitalism based on race that makes you more vulnerable, unable to pay the $100 to get tested for COVID, even when you have health insurance. And when most of you don't have health insurance, you can't afford to pay to even get tested. So how do you know? And then you have the government, which is looking at the situation, and in order to hide their hand, well, Trump basically, in order to hide his hand, he's like, oh, well, it's their fault. It's Black people's fault and it's people of color's fault. Or it's, you know, Chinese people's fault that everybody is sick, instead of saying we have a system that inherently leaves people vulnerable and exposed because of the racism. And it's just like, it kind of blows my mind sometimes, naively perhaps, how people will just say, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense that you would just blame people that don't look like you for your own sickness in the world. It's just, it seems like crazy making, but it is delusion, right? It is delusion. So another question is about fatherhood. So as fathers of young children, have you had to explain any of the issues or made changes in the way you navigate through life with your children?
Personally, my kids haven't had to experience too much. And, my oldest is 4 years old and still crazy as I don't know what, man. I pray for my wife right now. She's dealing with all three. But, I have young brothers, and one's in college right now. Another one lives in Atlanta. But, I have to, look out for their well-being. There are going to be talks I have to have with my children and my brothers that, they're not going to be perceived as they've always had, as I perceive them. And, even if you show, surrender and show empathy and show emotion, you have to understand that there are going to be people that don't like you and are fearful of you. My son is, he's a 4-year-old that already looks like he's 10. So they're already going to be afraid of him when he's a grown man. And, they're going to be, they're going to be preconceived notions of how he's going to act or how he's going to react to things. And, one thing I've always, that baffles me is that people think, because you're strong or because you're this, you're angry. And you can't show an emotion that deserves anger. And, as humans, we all have different feelings and we all react differently. But if I deserve to give you anger, you deserve that anger for a reason. And it should be set as that. My heart should outweigh what the color of my skin is. And, my heart, if I have an interaction with you and you get to talk to me, you should value me off my skin and my heart, and not devalue me off of my skin. And, those are things my son and my 2 daughters are gonna have to learn. You're already fighting, with a monkey on your back, and you got to understand that you got to be twice as good just to be, up to par.
Okay.
Yeah, I have young children too. My daughter is 4. My son is 18 months old. They are also like, whenever people say that children are like the best people, I'm like, have you had kids? You actually had kids? They're a lot. You love them because they look like you, and they're you basically, and you have to feed them. But it's like, yeah, y'all are a lot. You are doing the most. But so with my 4-year-old Zoe, we've told her, because we have to do all this stuff because of COVID with the mask and sterilizing things that come in the house and making sure to take off your shoes and we were already doing that, but it's even more, I guess, exaggerated. Now, we've told her that the outside is sick. And that, when we go outside, the outside is sick right now. So when we come back inside, we have to make sure we clean ourselves up. And when we're outside, we have to try, if you're in a store with mommy and daddy, don't touch anything, wear your mask, wash your hands as soon as you get in the house, and so I'm just thinking how that message, if this continues and she gets older, how that message is going to shift when she like, Daddy, you said the outside is sick? That doesn't make any sense. Can you explain to me what actually, why are you lying to me? Why are you gaslighting me, Dad? So there's that. And as far as them being Black Americans, Black people in America, there's a famous talk, right? The talk that Black parents have their children, to teach them how to act around police, how to act around white people, that, and let them know that, yes, this racism, there's bias, people will look at you differently, people might hate you without even knowing you, and this is kind of how you are supposed to act in order to protect yourself and stay alive. And I write a little bit, the last chapter of my book is devoted to my daughter. It's almost like a letter to her. And I've been going back and forth with whether or not I want to have that talk with my kids, because my wife and I are going to equip them with as much knowledge as they could possibly hold about America, about the world, about themselves, about the physical environment, about their parents, about themselves, about just everything. But I don't want them to be scared. I don't want them to see a police officer or see a white person or whatever and have like, oh, I need to act this way. Like, I don't know. And again, maybe if you ask me in 5 years, 4 years, I might have a different answer, but I want them to have just a healthy respect for their environment and their surroundings. But I don't want that respect to cross the line into terror or fear. And that's tricky, because how do you communicate that as a parent to your child? And that's the thing I'm still learning, and I'm still figuring out how to do. Okay, I want them to get this lesson, but I don't want them to give them so much information and make things so like dire or whatever that they are paralyzed with fear once they leave the house. So again, that's the thing. I'm new. My oldest is 4, so I've been a dad for 4 years. So I'm still figuring out how to work through this.
And so how are you both taking care of yourselves? You guys are people that have multiple roles. You are public figures, writers, athletes, fathers, friends.
Athletes. I think we have one athlete on the call.
I didn't want to say former athlete.
I go to LA Fitness still sometimes, but we have one athlete.
One athlete. So with all of these roles that you fulfill, how do you take care of yourselves? And this is a question from, one of our viewers. How do you do self-care for your mental health? And also, how do you make sure that your significant others are able to do the same with all their multiple roles?
Oh, that is a loaded question, I feel like. Especially if my wife was on. No, I'm kidding. I think when the pandemic first started, you look at that time and you're like, oh my gosh, you're just running with your head cut off. You're trying to adjust, you're trying to do this, you're trying to do that. You're trying to play dad, trying to play husband. You're trying to, deal with the pandemic. What do we know? What do we not know? I think one of the things we've tried to do is create a routine. And, whether it's me, I think in a relationship, you got to have time for yourself. And I think me and my wife have both had to understand that. Just because I'm a football player doesn't mean I need all the time in the world. My wife is an amazing, mom, but she can't play mom every single minute of the day. And, I think you have to feed both people in a relationship, and you have to make sure everybody's satisfied. Does it happen all, equally? No. I think me and Damon were just talking before, he said it best, his wife is the caretaker, and she does way more. And, but that doesn't stop us from, being fathers and being, being, husbands and, getting closer to God still. And, looking for ways I can better my community and be a good athlete. You know, these are all things I strive to do. And if I have to, and I have to, set a regimen straight, I have to, but I have to feed the fire to all of them. You know, if I don't, it's just going to go out in the flames.
Yeah, and you brought up a really good point, Cam, about space, about the importance of space, and we're privileged enough to have a nice size house where we can have our own spaces in the house. I'm in a space right now. My wife is with the kids downstairs. There are rooms that we could go to or whatever, and that does help a lot. Where even if you're married, even if you love each other, even if you want to be next to each other, you still need space sometimes just to be able to not even do anything, just to sit and check your phone or whatever. And COVID has made that a lot more difficult because, we get our space sometimes by leaving. My wife goes to the gym a lot too and has her own yoga studio and would be doing stuff. And now both of those things have been shut down. Basketball, I still try to play 3 or 4 times a week. So that was a very important function of self-care for me. And also not just self-care, but also cardiovascular. I mean, I'm 41 years old, so I'm trying to stay as in shape as I could possibly can for as long as I can. And so now I'm jumping rope now. Like I can't hoop anymore with people. So I bought some jump ropes and I go and I jump rope in front of the house. So trying to find self-care right now is extremely difficult. Like this is an unprecedented time. And so, and we're reading stuff. There's new stuff being published every day about people who are just getting burned out and just don't know what to do. And we just haven't been in a situation like this where it's almost like everyone's on punishment. We just can't, no one's allowed to leave the house. So what do you do? How do you replace the things that kept you re-energized, before? I feel like I'm saying a lot of things with no answers, and I'm just trying to be honest. I don't know how to replace the things that we're not able to do now. Even if we're in the house and we get some space or whatever, and my wife and I, when the kids get to bed, sometimes we'll just watch a movie, or she'll be on her laptop, I'll be on my laptop, and we'll just be vegging out on the couch, and that helps sometimes. But we go for walks, bike rides, but even that, as great as they are, just it's a supplement to something that was a big part of both of our lives before, and it's just much, much harder to find now.
It's crazy. Like Giant Eagle, going to Giant Eagle has become like, escape for us.
Yeah. Wait, which one do you go to?
We're right here at the Wexford Market District one.
I saw you about 3 or 4 weeks ago. I was like, I think that's Cam Heyward from the Steelers. You were like, you had your mask on, and we had parked at like the same time. So you were wearing your mask. I couldn't really. I said, I think that's Cam. And I was at the Westford Market District, which I like it. If you people, Pittsburghers out there, if you're looking to shop somewhere, the Wexford Market District has a social distancing thing happening. They are really mindful about space. They don't let you in the store without a mask. So if you have the means to get out there and shop, then, because I've tried to go to the one over here on the north side, and I felt like I was in a haunted house because everyone's on top of each other and there's not as much room, and it just didn't feel, and I'm already anxious about that, the whole process now, and that just didn't help. So I made the trip out there, and it's worth it. If you can get out there, then I think that you should.
And so my last question before we close is, you both write beautifully about Pittsburgh. and you guys are from here, raised here, dedicated to the city in many different ways. And so how do you see Pittsburgh as kind of like a microcosm as the larger community that we're in as Americans? And what are some exchanges that you see that, you know, like, what are some things that Pittsburgh could teach the larger community? And then what are some things that we could take in as a city as well?
You know, I think, you know, we look at Pittsburgh, you know, and I think we see a lot of diversity in the city, but outside the city, there's still, you know, a long way to go. And, you know, I can speak for myself when I say, you know, Pittsburgh is near and dear to my heart. And, you know, I've always viewed the city as a blue collar city that, you know, you're judged off your work. And, you know, if you work hard, that will go a long way. But there's still a lot of work to be done. And I look at those other communities and I look to see outside Pittsburgh and I look for change to happen in our communities so we can set the example. You know, I look back at, you know, the old days when you had Willie Stargell and you had Joe Green and these public figures, you know, stood out and led the cause across Pittsburgh, but, you know, we got to do the same and, you know, do it 10 times better.
Yeah, and you know, Pittsburgh, I think is a almost like a one-to-one microcosm of America. Just, you know, demographically, culturally, in a way. To, you know, I think that Pittsburgh is a city that thinks it's more progressive than it actually is, and I think that's true for America too. I know that when that terrorist act happened, you know, a couple years ago, the Tree of Life, and the narrative that came after that was, you know, Pittsburgh is stronger than hate. This is not us. We are better than this. And that it was a very compelling, very seductive narrative. But the reality is that the person who did this terrible act was from Baldwin. It's not like he came from somewhere else. He was born and raised and went to school here, you know, 5 minutes outside the city. And so I think that Pittsburgh is in a very precious place where we have the means, you know, we have the infrastructure, we have the I don't know, the economy or whatever, the ecosystem to be able to actually be who we say we want to be. Like we don't have any excuses not to do that. And so, yeah, maybe we could be a leader in this reformation or whatever that's happening right now. But Pittsburgh has to actually want to do that and not just say they want to do it. Not just say we want to do it. It has to actually want to.
Any last thoughts? Any pearls of wisdom you guys want to drop?
I just want to say that this has been great. Thank you, Jessica, for putting this together. Cam, it was great I've been a fan of yours for a minute, so it was great to, you know, just finally chop it up here with you. And this has been great. You know, I had a lot of fun, and yeah, I hope the people watching, you know, got something out of it on their Friday. I mean, it's not like you got anywhere else to go. I mean, there's nowhere to go. We're in the house right now, so this is probably the best thing happening in the city right now. So,
thanks. The August Wilson Center appreciates that. But I also want to thank you guys for your generosity. Thanks for making time. I could hear children, little Cams and little James in the background screaming. So thank you guys for making time, and thank you for being so generous and so open. We really, really appreciate all of you guys. Someone just said in the comments, it is the best thing going on in Pittsburgh. So good job, guys. Go team.
Thank you, guys.
Go team. You guys have a great evening.
All right.
Get your wives off duty.
All right.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.